All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting on Tuesday, November the 19th, 2024, of the Wilmington Wildwood School Building Project. I'd like to call the meeting to order this evening, and we'll begin with roll call.
Good evening, everyone. Diane Allen.
Here.
Greg Bendel.
Here.
Kate Bissell. Is she remote? Remote. Thank you. Glenn.
Here.
Kevin Kyra. Michael Camosio. Justin Couchet.
Here.
Marianne Galezzo.
Here.
Thank you. Nick Golden.
Here.
Christine Holleran.
Here.
Thank you. John Holloway. Dennis Kelly.
Here.
Paul Melorani.
Here.
Craig Miner.
Here.
Thank you. Christine Murray.
Oh, here's Kevin Kyra.
Judy O'Connell.
Here.
Christine Pendergast.
Here.
David Ragsdale.
Here.
Paul Ruggiero.
Here.
Stacy Scott. Here. Eric Schlegel.
Here.
Stephen Turner.
Here.
And myself, Vivian Verbedian.
And Kevin Kyra just walked
And
in.
Mr. Guy was here.
Kevin Kyra just walked in.
Hello. Welcome.
I'll see what you're doing during the roll call.
Thank you, Michael.
Great, thank you, everyone, and with that, we will get started. We have quite a few items of business to work through tonight. We'll follow the agenda in sequence. First off, we'll start with the approval of minutes. Those were distributed last week by SMMA. These are the minutes of October 21st, 2024, and as always, looking for a motion to approve this evening.
So moved.
Get a first and a second, right there, back to back. Okay, with that, thank you. Any comments or discussion on the minutes of October 21st? Seeing none, hearing none, if we could again have a roll call, please.
Absolutely. Diane Allen.
Yes.
Greg Bendel.
Yes.
Kate Bissell. Glenn Brand.
Yes.
Kevin Kyra.
Yes.
Michael Camosio.
Yes.
Justin Couchet.
Yes.
Marianne Galezzo.
Yes.
Nicholas Golden.
Yes.
Christine Holleran.
Yes.
Dennis Kelly.
Yes.
Paul Melorani.
Yes.
Craig Miner.
Yes.
Judy O'Connell.
Yes.
Christine Pendergast.
Yes.
David Ragsdale.
Yes.
Paul Ruggiero.
Yes.
Stacy Scott.
Yes.
Eric Schlegel.
Yes.
Stephen Turner.
Yes.
And myself, yes.
Great, thank you, everyone. Moving on to item number 3, approval of invoices. Warrants number 17 is before the committee this evening. Should I turn that over, Julie, to yourself?
My apologies, I don't have much of a voice this evening, so. Warrant article number 17, first invoices for SMMA, our basic services for feasibility for the month of October in the amount of $3,750. Next is Doran Whittier Architects, basic services, the remainder of their feasibility study in the amount of $3,000. And then followed up by their designer basic services for schematic design in the amount of $38,500. On the warrant article that you all received, there was a typo. The total amount for the warrant article is $45,250. And Dennis Kelly with the recommendation from the Finance Working Group.
I'd like to make a motion to approve warrant Article 17, in the amount of $45,250.
Thank you, Dennis.
Second.
No.
We have a motion and a second. Okay, any discussion?
Yeah,
Mr. Carter?
could we break these warrants out in the future? Because I'm opposed to the SMMA money, but not the dual Whittier. So that's why I abstained.
Yeah, you s- The 42,000?
Other comments or questions? Thank you, Mr. Carter.
Oh, is it?
So, can we help out in terms of a response for that?
Do you want to change it now?
Or can I ask a question if you don't mind?
Vivian?
I understand your opposition, but do we normally put 2 warrant articles for 1 month's invoices? Like, would it complicate or make the project, billings a little bit more than it needs to be?
Well, there'd be separate invoices from SMA and Durham Whittier anyway.
They are, which
So-
they are.
I just did the total amount. We could do a motion for the SMA of $37.50, then we could do
A separate motion.
a separate motion,
Yeah,
for-
that,
$42,500.
and then just keep it as 1 warrant number, though?
I don't know if yeah, I think it'd still be just the one warrant number, but it's just 2 different, would have to be a separate warrant number.
Approvals.
I think you probably have to do different warrant
Two
numbers.
different warrants? So that one is 17 and one is 18. So you want me to do it that way?
That's what the committee would like.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve warrant Article 17 for SMA of $3,750. Is there a second?
Second.
Just point of information.
Yes,
Do
sir.
we need to retract it
I
first?
think
So I
first,
retract my first motion.
Okay, so just to guide the committee, so we have a new motion on the table we're going to, with the intention to separate the 2 warrants. Could you repeat that again, Dennis? Thank
So
you.
I'd like to make a motion to approve warrant Article 17 in the amount of $33,750 for SMMA.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and we have a second on that, what is now of 2 votes tonight, I'm sorry, forgive me. So the first one, 33,000, we have a motion and a second, discussion. Okay, so I guess we will need 2 roll call votes in turn.
Sure,
Thank you.
absolutely. Diane Allen,
Yes.
Greg Bendel,
Yes.
Kate Bissell, Glenn Brand,
Yes.
Kevin Kyra,
This is for SMMA?
Yes.
No.
Michael Comosio,
Yes.
Justin Couche,
Yes.
Marianne Galezzo,
Yes.
Nicholas Golden,
Yes.
Christine Holleran,
Yes.
Dennis Kelly,
Yes.
Paul Melorani,
Yes.
Craig Minor,
Yes.
Judy O'Connell,
Yes.
Christine Pendergast,
Yes.
David Ragsdale,
Yes.
Paul Ruggiero,
Yes.
Stacy Scott,
Yes.
Eric Schlegel,
Yes.
Stephen Turner,
Yes.
and myself, yes.
Thank you. Dennis, if you
So I'd
could.
like to make another motion for warrant Article 18 for Doran Whittier, in a total amount of $41,500.
Second?
Thank you. We have a motion, we have a second. Discussion, questions? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Diane Allen,
Yes.
Greg Bendel,
Yes.
Kate Bissell,
Yes.
Glenn Brand,
Yes.
Kevin Kyra,
Yes.
Michael Comosio,
Yes.
Justin Couche,
Yes.
Marianne Galezzo,
Yes.
Nicholas Golden,
Yes.
Christine Holleran,
Yes.
Dennis Kelly,
Yes.
Paul Melorani,
Yes.
Craig Minor,
Yes.
Judy O'Connell,
Yes.
Christine Pendergast,
Yes.
David Ragsdale,
Yes.
Paul Ruggiero,
Yes.
Stacy Scott,
Yes.
Eric Schlegel,
Yes.
Stephen Turner,
Yes.
and myself, yes.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Moving on to item number 4, design update. And I will just take the opportunity to note, we're going to go in discussion, but there is a proposal with the will of the committee for item number 7 for new items tonight to talk more about the gymnasium. There's obviously been some discussion and some recommendations by members of the committee, and the leadership group met earlier today. I think you know that we meet on Tuesdays, and we did discuss this matter, and the thought is to bring forward an update to the committee regarding the gym under new items, under number 7 later tonight. But there's again, a lot of information to go through. I'll turn it over to our consultants for the design update. You can see the items, the various items there, and we'll start with the preferred schematic report update.
Thank you, Dr. Brand. As you all know, we submitted the preferred schematic report towards the end of October, and that was with the preferred option to the MSBA. On the screen, you'll see the main sections of that report that was submitted. There's several pieces of that process. So first, MSBA will review the report, and they provide us comments back, which we actually just received today, so we really haven't had time to fully even read through them, but, and then we have 14 days to respond to those comments. Some of those comments, they will want more information on certain things that we've talked about during, within the report. Other comments include just acknowledging that we will be further studying different components or pieces through schematic design, and different expectations for when we submit the schematic design package. So we'll be going through those in more detail to understand what the comments are and respond to those in the next 14 days. The second part of that, if you don't mind, I'm skipping to, I guess, can I go through these, or do you have to call them? Okay. So the second part of that is the Facilities Assessment Subcommittee meeting. In your packet was the presentation that we had put together for the Facilities Assessment Subcommittee. We did a dry run with any of the speakers, and then actually had that presentation on November 13th. And on the screen, you'll see some of the takeaways that we heard from MSBA. Overall, I thought it was a very positive meeting. They had a lot of, just some feedback for us. But overall, they thought that the consolidation project was the appropriate project to move forward with, as well as the site selection. And, the design layouts were well received. They did stress that they thought professional development was something that was important to start early on in the process, so that when the project is, the doors open, that the teachers have an understanding of how they can utilize some of these spaces that they don't currently have now. Then also the integration of STEM into the classrooms. They love that the STEM classroom was adjacent to the library space, and the interaction that happens there, but also being able for the younger students to make sure that that's also happening in their classrooms as well. And part of that is having like 2 sinks in the elementary ed classrooms, so that they can do those types of projects. SPED and extended learning areas, they felt that those were really nicely integrated throughout the floor plans, and that was also well received. The cost per square foot, they felt that it was reasonable for a new build based on other projects that they're seeing. And then they just wanted us to consider schedule impacts of supply chain issues that has been experienced with various projects, and just keeping that in mind, whether we do design, bid, build, or construction management at risk. And then I know there were several people at the meeting, so I don't know if any of them want to jump in and provide any of their feedback, but I'll pause there just to give others an opportunity to speak about that meeting. There is.
Can I ask a question? Just
Sure.
Who is the Facilities Assessment
Oh,
Subcommittee?
sure.
And or is it people here?
No, it's from the MSBA, so it is.
It's
yeah.
a subset of the board of directors who eventually we'll be presenting the project to, and this gives that group of board members an informal opportunity to ask us pertinent questions as the project is developing. So their feedback is pretty critical to ultimately the approval of board, so we get to hear kind of what's on their minds, what they're seeing in other projects.
That makes sense now.
Thank you.
I had the opportunity to attend the Facilities Assessment Subcommittee meeting, and I thought their comments were very thoughtful. They had genuinely looked at all the drawings, the plans, and everything that we had laid out as a committee, as our submission package, and the questions were very thoughtfully asked. So I thought it was very well done, and thank you for prepping for that and having a great presentation.
Thanks. Others who are present, or other questions?
Question. So with regard to the last point they raised, presuming your past experience, supply chain issues are more of an issue nowadays, but they've always been a topic. So presumably there's mitigations for design, bid, build to manage supply chain issues, correct?
I think the reason that they pointed this out is because the design build process actually is more difficult to mitigate some of those issues coming through, just the way the contracts are set up, in contrast to a CM at risk contract, which allows you as an owner to purchase items early. Like if there's a supply issue with steel and we know prices are gonna expected to climb in the next 6 months, Under a CM contract, you could purchase that steel in advance ahead of that escalation. Or if another example is, we see it all the time with like rooftop units, heating and ventilation, right? All the different components that come internationally, depending on what's happening out in the supply chain. There was a really big issue with that during the pandemic. So projects wouldn't be able to open up because, right, there's no heating or ventilation. So the CM process does allow you to navigate that a little bit more nimbly, being able to identify what the, subject du jour is as far as what are issues, and the ability to be able to move around that, purchase in advance of some of those things, or alternatively. It's a much more difficult process with design bid build because they are not engaged until the project is fully designed. And at that point, the clock is running and we're off into construction. So a lot of this work can be done during the design process, working with the construction manager to identify what those issues are as relative to our design.
But they didn't ask that question specifically like that. They just more
Pointed it out.
pointed it out. that
Just be aware of it,
yeah.
right?
No, fair. And being aware of it, we can do what we can do. So okay, thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Other questions?
Yeah, I would just like to add that working on 2 current projects going on now in Wilmington, as you know, the town hall / school administration is CM at risk, okay? And the senior center is design bid build. With the town hall, that issue of the steel came up in the beginning, and they were able to order that steel ahead of time, even though it came from Canada, and that's why we are where we are. We have a problem with the senior center, not a big problem, but unfortunately it's going to cause a delay with the electrical. And that, nothing could be done. No, it's just not going to come in until the middle, maybe the beginning of December. And it's unfortunate because then it takes a couple of months to work everything out and train everybody. So I particularly see the difference. I attend the weekly construction meetings, both of them. I go to the town hall first, and then at 1 o'clock I go over to the senior center. And there's quite a bit of a difference in negotiating change orders.
Thanks, Stan. Other questions or comments regarding the first 2 items that we just reviewed? Okay, Ronnie? Schematic design schedule review.
So this is an overview of the schematic design schedule. You also received in your packet a tentative schedule for meetings. All of the meetings are listed more to just keep us on track and to give you an idea of what we'll be covering each week. As far as the dates, if we have to move a meeting from a Tuesday to a Wednesday to a Thursday, that's all there, but we just are trying to identify what the tasks are each week and what we'll be sharing with you each week and what we're developing kind of behind the scenes as well. So it's just to give you an idea of this timeline. For November, we went through the user group meetings, and I'll touch on that more in a minute. We had the FAS meeting, and then today is the schematic design kickoff with all of you. In December, we will be bringing back design updates, and that includes information on the gym, and we will also have a visioning exercise for all of you for the exterior and interior imagery, where you'll have boards to look at, and we will allow you to walk around and ask you to put red and green dots, red for what you're not preferring and green for what you prefer. And it just gives us an idea of how to move forward as we're starting to present designs for you to review for the exterior and also looking at the interior. And then there's 2 SBC meetings planned in December on the 3rd and also the 17th. And then also December 13th is the MSBA board meeting, and that's where they would be approving the preferred schematic report and the project to officially move into schematic design. And then in January and February, we'll continue with design updates, and throughout the process, we'll be working with the Sustainability Committee to develop that side of the project as well and bring updates as we move along. February into March, it'll be cost estimating, and before we know it, April will be here, and we will be submitting schematic design to MSBA. So it's a pretty quick but very rigorous process. It's a very important process because, as we've mentioned before, there's a lot of detail that MSBA is going to be asking for, so we're going to be asking a lot of questions of you and feedback from you so that we're putting the right information into the documents. And that's what's priced, and that's what the project scope and budget is set, and that's your agreement with MSBA on what the final cost of the project is. So, and that's what locks you in with the MSBA on the pricing. So this is actually a very important part of the process because of what happens at the end and that's like the culmination of this first big feasibility study for the MSBA.
For interior, does that just infer walls and floors, or is it also tables, chairs, that's it, like all kit and caboodle?
So with tables and chairs, because those are movable furniture, the way that works is there's a budget for that. And, we'll have different options. So we'll get more into that as we get into like design development and the construction documents. But this just gives us an idea of what we're doing. But in reality, there's an FF&E furniture equipment budget that the project carries. And if there was anything that was beyond that, then it's something that we just have to be aware of to move forward in the project.
Mostly interior materials, color schemes, kind of palette, and we're not asking for you guys to pick out.
Final decision.
Right, there's a big group of us here, and everyone's gonna have, and design is a very subjective thing. So we've produced a bunch of things that we think are in context with design in Wilmington, stuff that we think works. And it's a very diverse set of imagery, and we want to be able to put that out so we can kind of get a flavor of things that you guys like and don't like, and that'll help hone us onto our next iteration when we bring this stuff back. I just wanted to make a point about the schedule because there is a lot of stuff here, and in the handout there's some more detail that we don't have to go through, but the big takeaway from this is we build our design off of every meeting that we have with you, and it happens in sequence. And to be able to produce at the end of this what MSBA requires for the documentation is a big lift. And so we're trying to put the tracks out in front of people so you guys know what the expectations are of when we're going to be presenting things, kind of what sequence we are in the process. We kind of got to hit these milestones that we've got in the schedule for us to be able to deliver at the end of this with MSBA. We just asked them for a schedule extension on our feasibility study, which they've agreed to, but we don't want to go back for more. So we got to hit these dates, and it's a lot of work for us to do. And we don't want to bury you at every meeting and say we're going to be here for 3 hours and a whole bunch of decisions. We just want to be able to feed you systematic, incremental pieces, in bite sizes that make sense.
On that point, I just, a couple of things I'll say. I did ask our consultants, knowing we're going into the holiday period, and it's a very, very busy time into December. I did ask the question whether or not they felt that 2 meetings were warranted, and the short answer is yes, just to Lee's point. There's a lot of things that we have to work through as a group. So that you see the 2 meetings are here. As a leadership group meeting this morning, we did talk about, and something that I wanted to float to the committee, whether or not there was a will, or there is a will perhaps of the committee at large, to shift the December 17th meeting to remote. That is something that, recognizing that might be a little bit easier for folks right at that, approaching the holiday period for many. So I wanted to get a sense of the committee on that, and then more broadly, talk about the schedule, the proposed schedule here for the meetings at large. But Judy, I think you had a question.
I apologize, I didn't recognize that you were going to speak to the meeting dates. As was shared, the Finance Committee dates have not been posted yet in terms of the budget season. So I already know wholeheartedly that there will be definite conflicts to the Tuesday, Thursday schedule that they typically have, and as I mentioned, they're not set. I understand that this is a very large group. Respectfully stated, I just want to voice the concern, of the town manager, Finance Committee members, some other key stakeholders that may need to be 2 places at once. And I think that we're at a very critical time in both of those endeavors. So I know that you had indicated that you would be flexible on changing the dates, but we also have the school committee that has their meetings on Wednesdays, the select board has their meetings on Mondays, so I'm a little concerned, you know, how we're gonna fit all this in, but I at least wanted to put that on the record for this meeting. I understand, you know, December 17th and the appropriate suggestion in terms of having a virtual component. Some of the items that are there, I'm asking this in the form of a question. Do you think that discussing interior and exterior design, you know, is something that you visually need to be in the room to see? Do you think that that can be selected virtually and still go as well as if it went in person based on the nature of what you're discussing?
Sure.
I think the concept is on the 3rd, we're gonna have the boards in place
Okay.
with a live meeting so people can actually see that stuff and have some communication with us as we're walking around those boards. On the 17th, it's gonna be a little bit of reporting back on the summary of that stuff, and if we have some initial ideas and concept of what that synthesis looks like.
Thanks.
Just to
Skyra.
Just to piggyback a little bit on Ms. O'Connell, regarding people that won't be here during the budget season, that would include the selectmen that are here, town manager, assistant town manager. And don't forget that I believe Dennis Kelly makes a presentation for budget, and I believe you do as well. So those are dates that you're gonna have to be mindful of. And the school committee meets every other Wednesday, and selectmen meet every other Monday, so you have Mondays and Wednesdays available to you.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll take the schedule back, and especially for the January and February months, we'll look at what the alternate schedule dates are for Mondays and Wednesdays and see what we can adjust to.
I think they start like at the end of January,
End of
all
January.
February, March, and the very beginning of April.
Okay.
Mr. Select, can I ask, do we know when the finance committee will have those dates set?
I can certainly ask them tomorrow when I meet with them. I don't know that they haven't set them yet, so I would imagine they'll be set within the next month or so. But I think if the superintendent can give us the dates for the school committee meetings, and I can give you the dates for the select board meetings, then we can just kind of fill in those other weeks for the.
Sure.
We have the
It's 4
school,
days a month.
certainly the school committee meetings are set through the year,
Yeah.
through the end of the year,
Select
so
board
we can
meetings are
certainly have those.
scheduled, so.
I'll just add,
If I could chime in, February, Tuesdays and Thursdays is always finance committee member meetings. I did talk to Mr. Doherty briefly. He doesn't intend on changing the dates. There'll always be Tuesdays and Thursdays. And the beginning of March, those first 2 weeks in March at least will be Tuesdays and Thursdays. And the last probably week to 2 weeks in January would be Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Mary Ann, is that every Tuesday and Thursday, every week?
Yes, every week.
How many members of this committee attend the finance meetings, the finance committee
mean,
meetings?
It depends on which one.
Okay.
Five of us will be there at every one, and then
Okay.
Dennis.
No, I was just trying to get a sense of like getting a consensus or also, you know.
And hopefully, the members of the public will come to the finance committee meetings to serve the budget process.
I just wanted to add, right, we took a stab at trying to lay this schedule out and all the things we need to get accomplished between now and when we need to submit. And we didn't have the advanced knowledge of kind of when these meetings would be scheduled. And I will say, we will do our utmost to be flexible to try and arrange to get as many people here as we can if we gotta adjust dates, Monday, Tuesday, whatever that is. Just the overall structure of this, like shifting stuff by weeks, really doesn't work because it feels like it's a lot of time, but there isn't really a lot of time on the way this is built. So if we can kind of follow this as a roadmap and certainly adjust days within the week, but as far as its content and milestones, we should try and stick to that.
Other comments or questions about the calendar, the schedule? Just back to the question around the 17th of the 17th of December, sense of the committee around a desire to switch that meeting to remote?
Just to follow up on the previous point, what would be the content specific to that meeting then?
So that mean it'll be a summary of the information that we gathered from the exercise of trying to find out aesthetics and what we liked, and any preliminary design information that we may have at that point, which should be content that will be available through a online meeting.
Including the traffic study and the,
Yeah, and we could be able to present that way too.
Yeah, I just was trying to figure out, you're picking out colors and carpet and things of that nature?
No. This is just kind of like big overall aesthetic, kind of what things, styles do you like, architectural styles, more modern, so we'll have a variety of different images of buildings that are in different architectural styles with different materials, and we don't need you to pick anything. We're just kind of like, I like that. I don't like that so much, I wouldn't want to see that here. We'll take all of that, because obviously it's a very diverse group, and we'll try and tease out a string that's similar, and that's what we're going to use to be able to bring forward. And we'll present that back to you on the 17th.
I strongly prefer the in-person or hybrid meetings. I think the committee just simply works better when we're all in person, or as many people are in person as possible. And I just don't see really a reason to go away from that.
I mean, if we're gonna be, Zoom, what's the difference? We might as well be here unless it's snowing.
Right, fully up to you. We're happy to accommodate any which way.
I guess the question would be, is there anybody who has an issue with the 17th about being present?
I will be traveling that day, but I will dial in.
yeah, I think if we maintain the hybrid model as we have been doing it, whoever can be in person can come in and others be remote.
Yeah, 17th I'll be on for the first half hour, and then I'll have to excuse myself.
I'll be absent from that one too. I have a prior commitment.
Okay, well, I guess we'll keep the format as hybrid. Okay, thank you. Ronnie, you're up next.
User group meetings. So we have held several user group meetings. I should have counted how many groups we actually met with, but over the course of 3 days, we pretty much did full morning to late afternoon, where we met with different groups. And the intent of the user group meetings is to invite the end users to give us more information and also share what we've done up until this point, to walk them through the plans, for them to understand where their spaces are located on the new plan, looking at the adjacencies of what's near and around them, for them to give us feedback, like if preschool, when we met with the preschool and K group, they have the littlest feet, and what's too far for them. Luckily all rooms will have a bathroom, so that's not really an issue. But getting to music, getting to art, getting to the library, just for them to be able to identify and see if there are any issues that we catch it now, so we can start making those adjustments as we're developing the plan in this phase. So we met with the nurse, the medical staff, the admin, guidance, counseling, all the different grade groupings. We did building operations and maintenance, kitchen and food service. We actually had our consultant in on that meeting, so they actually had a really productive, I just kind of sat back. It was great to hear them talk, and he's already laying things out, so it's fantastic. All of the special education spaces, being that they're distributed around the building. So there was a lot of feedback that we received. We have our last one tomorrow with music, and after that we will meet with the administration just to do a feedback session, and kind of just like close that loop. And then we take all of that information. We have, we'll generate meeting minutes and just to kind of capture everything. And then what happens is we develop over schematic design room data sheets, and that will give us a typical room and how we would outfit that room, whether it's built-in casework, making sure that we understand the adjacencies, whether they have, doors, different types of doors that are connecting into the small group rooms. Actually, one of the feedback pieces that we got that will change is the specialists all said they really thought that the small group room should have a door from the corridor. Right now, there were only doors from the classroom, and that way it provides more flexibility without having to enter into a classroom to use the small group rooms, which was great feedback. Every district is different on how they like that handled, so that was great to hear now. So as we're going through, we can add those doors in. So, different pieces like that, but this just helps inform the design. So it allows the end user to have that time to give feedback early on instead of waiting till the end and saying, here you go, figure it out, So it's really important that they're engaged from, just as much as we want to engage the community, the end users get to have that feedback sessions as well.
There's a couple of things here for us when we're looking at these. The first part obviously is the data mining that we do to be able to understand exactly what they need in each of these spaces, from furnishing some initial talks to technology to outlets, to layout. The other thing that I think is really important too is for us it's a litmus test on how well we did at the first layout of the floor plan. And that was developed over time, right? We've been working on this for over a year now. So, it started with visioning, what our thoughts on how to place that, where adjacencies were. And so usually when at this point in the project, we go through these user group meetings, and for us, does the plan work? Does it stay intact? Or is the feedback that we're getting really starting to move all the pieces around? And so we were pleasantly surprised with how intact the plan stayed throughout the user group meetings. There are a few little things that, people would move just so they have, support spaces are, in the right spot so they don't have to travel too far. But surprisingly intact at a first pass, so that was pretty good. And so we take that user group along with the information that you guys have provided us. You asked us some questions about the gym, and you've heard some of my concerns about that and the fact that we have to make decisions so we can keep moving forward. We have some stuff to show you tonight, and we've tried to look at this as taking all of these user group input meetings, the input from you guys or with the gym, to try and come up with some solutions that could work. So that's just how that process works with us, and it was a good first pass for me, at least, to be able to sit there and listen to all the different spaces and the adjacencies worked pretty well. And I don't know what your takeaway from those were.
No, I just, I would want to share with the committee a couple of things, and thank you for sharing that information. So over the course of 3 days, we had well over 50 staff from all 3 schools that came forward. And I want to thank Stacy Scott, who's here, Kate Bissell, and Diane Carrero, the 3 principals of the 3 schools, who gave pretty much all of their time over the 3 days. And I sat in for almost all of those meetings as well, too. But the level of staff engagement and interest is really high, which is awesome to see. And with the aid of the principals, we selected whether it was OT, PT, or speech, or special education. So just to share with the committee, as our designers are taking back the information, it's coming not just from administrators or school leaders, but it's coming from what will be end users, right? Those staff who work and know those spaces, and clearly their feedback is really important. So I just wanted to share that with you, but I appreciate the feedback, and it was a great opportunity. It was a lot of time for everyone, but I think time well worth it. And again, just the level of engagement from staff as a committee, I just want to share that with you. It's there, and even though this is a project that's far down the road, and obviously without certainty yet in terms of it moving forward, the interest is building, and it's palpable. So it was great to have them involved. So, thanks, Ray.
Next up, we have working group updates. I'd like to give an update for the Public Relations Working Group.
I said, did you want to give the update?
Sure. So not much to report from the working group. We're still meeting weekly / bi-weekly, just making sure that we have all the information we need. We've started, we've kind of retweaked the meetings a little bit, so we're now meeting with SMMA and Doran Whittier to make sure that anything that goes out to the public is kind of official, and everything gets blessed. And so as those come forward and get approval from the entire committee, we'll be working on getting things out to the Apple, to the Patch, to Facebook groups, working with PAWS and the PACs as much as we need to in regards to that. But we've just been kind of making sure that we're not missing anything from a public-facing standpoint right now.
We've also updated, with the help of SMMA and Doran Whittier, all of the posters that are found around the town, providing them in visual depiction of the selected preferred option that we're moving forward. We wanted to make sure that the community understood that we did take a vote and selected a preferred option to move forward with, and which one that would be.
Those display boards were shown at the election polls, presidential election. We still have a few of them. We're gonna relocate them within the school. We're gonna put one here at the high school, put one at the library, so that, thank you, so that people, as they come in the next few months, before we have a real big design update that Doran Whittier can put together, we just want to stay relevant. We want people to know what the one preferred option is. So we're going to strategically place those boards in some of the schools and the library.
Ms. Julie? And for the working group, I just want to be sure that we're doing our due diligence to get whatever messaging we're getting out there to beyond, the obvious proponents of this project, that we're getting it out into the town. I'd like to see included, press releases to the town crier. There are people who just don't have social media, who don't have internet, elderly, et cetera. That is the demographic that we really need to keep informed of this project if we want to have a shot at the ballot box for this project and for town meetings. So we got to keep everybody informed, way beyond, like I said, the obvious proponents of this project.
No, absolutely agree, and we've talked about that in length as far as identifying where the opportunities are to broadcast, both visually as well as in a written format, whether it's through social media. The town crier has been one that we've been utilizing, as you guys are all aware, flyers as well, and we'll continue to do that and probably even increase it, since we're now getting into the next phase that will require a lot more, outward engagement with the community. Thank you for that, absolutely.
Can I ask if we're gonna have, anything at the special town meeting?
So, if I may just take that, I wanted to just comment that we also, our office, the town manager's office did have flyers out at the election polls as well.
Mhm.
So people could actually take, actual flyers that had the meeting dates and had the QR code. In order to do something at the special town meeting, I'm uncomfortable, through Eric to all of you to say yes, because we really need to talk with Beth Lawrenson to make sure as the town clerk that she's okay with that. If she's okay for us just to put information out about the project, but now that it's a preferred option, I just want to make sure, and I would have to put it through the town moderator as well to make sure that he's also comfortable with it. So, we're open to passing on that information, but we just want to do right by the professionals that are in those roles and make sure that we ask permission to do that.
Thank you for that, thank you.
Diane, did you?
Yeah, the only other thing I was going to say is a means, the water bills, just about hit everybody.
Yeah,
All
and we're
the
gonna be
homes.
continuing.
And that would be
We have that, we've done it in the past, and we have that on the schedule
Okay,
actually
good.
for the next one, so, absolutely.
In to your point too, if the town clerk thinks there may be some kind of a conflict, then maybe at the very least, we can have an informational booth set up and manned with the posters, et cetera, at the special town meeting outside.
Outside, no, that's a
In
great
the
idea. Thank
cafeteria,
you.
outside of the town meeting
Yeah,
itself.
in the reception area going in, thank you.
I'll just add, we will have thousands of people coming into the high school over the next number of weeks. This is the time of the year for concerts and for theater, so we'll make sure that we have boards in that lobby area as you enter the auditorium. There'll be a lot of foot traffic there, so.
We can give them a flyer and say they cannot leave the high school unless they have a flyer.
You can't get into the auditorium unless you have it.
Do we,
Love that idea.
the drama production this weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, do we have the poster boards to be placed in a desirable location?
It's intent to get the poster boards and a couple of them in the
Thursday,
lobby
Friday,
area.
Saturday at 6:30, as well as a matinee on Saturday.
Saturday at 1.
Thank you for that infomercial.
Yes.
There we go.
Do you have tickets over there?
Tickets are for sale.
Yeah, tickets.
Now that's a plug. That was good.
Okay, thank you for that. Unless there's anything further on the Public
Available
Relations Working
online and
Group.
at the door.
Moving on to Sustainability Green Design Working Group.
Dennis Kelly's going to give us an update on the tour that he took for geothermal at the Westwood School.
Yeah, I went out to the MSBA's tour of the Westwood School, elementary school, and their system is geothermal for heating it. They had a panel and panelists that we were able to ask questions of, and they shared some experiences around geothermal. Talked about when it has a leak, what you do, how you do it. They talked about pretty unanimously, you never put geothermal under a building, which some people design it that way, and Reading, the woman from Reading spoke up quickly because they were putting the geothermal angled under their building, which would have been a huge problem. So that was pretty informative as far as what not to do. And then from that, I met the facility manager for Westwood and pulled him aside, and myself and my building systems manager went down, and we're gonna walk the entire school just with him and go through all the geothermal in the mechanical room. They have solar panels on the roof. We're gonna walk the roof and see the solar panels. So that was a good networking. There was a few other towns that had their facility people there. We talked and shared some stories, so it was interesting. Obviously, there is a much greater cost to geothermal. Everyone that had it seemed happy they had it. There was definitely some, you gotta worry about lead times and things, because people, when you're doing it, making sure you have everything at the time. So, whether we go design, build, or CM at risk. CM at risk may be a value there. So it was just, overall, it was a lot of information, and, all the different options that we could do with geothermal, where to put it, how to put it, and then how well it works inside the buildings, so.
Can I ask a question? How long had they been utilizing the geothermal?
I think it was just over a year, right?
Okay.
And then the solar panels were just going on now, and that's phase 2, and the solar panels, I think they said it was gonna be 70% of their, would cover 70% of their electric costs for the building.
Were the solar panels getting installed now?
They were
or
installed,
electrified?
and just running now,
Okay,
but they
were
just
getting
came online.
electrified.
The geothermal was under the parking lots,
Mhm.
but the solar panels were just put on the roof in the past.
Did they express any concerns of it being under the parking lot, considering the weight of the
For their
parking?
area, that was the spot they could put it. And it was designed to handle the weight of the vehicles being on top of it. I think they talked about 18 inches around the pipes, and
Did they mention how many wells they had?
I wanna say it was 60.
60?
Yeah, they originally designed around 80 early on, and then they were able to, after doing more additional testing, they were able to go deeper, and so if you're able to go deeper, you
Yeah, you can do
reduce the
less.
number of wells, so. they
Yeah,
went
but
down to
like,
60.
you learned a lot of good information, like, with the geothermal comes a vault where everything comes up into.
Yep.
The vaults for them were in the ground, which now means anyone that works on it in their building has to be trained in tight confined spaces. If they went above ground, they wouldn't have needed that. Their BMS doesn't connect to anything in the well, in that vault, so, if there's an issue, it's only by going over and looking inside. So their suggestions were to have things like leak detection and things like that, so that you'd get a notification instead of, geez, pressures are low, I wonder where the leak is. They also did GPS tracking of all the geothermal wells, so that later on, if there is an issue, they can literally go and track it through GPS, which was an interesting concept. And they've actually used it to find a leak. And one other town I was talking to said the same thing, that it was worth the money to spend it, because now, for the life of it, you know exactly where every one of those wells are and everything underground.
They already had a leak within 1 year?
They had a leak when they were building, I believe he said. And it was in the vault, though. But it was, one of where it was hard to see.
Yeah.
But because of that GPS, it allowed to be able to know.
To trace it,
yeah.
the
So-
line and see where it was.
And, all the different ways it can go in, the angles, the different things, and how it can change the positions underground. So it was definitely interesting. It was, a lot of thought has to go into it. And then, like I said, from my side, making that connection to go out there and learn about what his costs are, and, so we can talk about budget numbers later on and what it would cost to run it. So, that's gonna be huge from our side.
And the payback.
Yeah.
And what town was the school in?
Westwood.
Westwood, okay.
Pine Hill.
What was it?
Pine Hills,
An elementary school?
yeah, elementary school.
An elementary school. About how many students?
I don't know, I don't remember off the top of my head.
Like 575, I think.
It's a
75?
K-5 school.
And just to be clear, like geothermal frees us of like natural gas, oil,
Yeah.
and all that stuff. This is a
It's,
supporting
we gotta
system.
start looking ahead as everyone. There's, the laws are changing, so by 2050, we have to be carbon-free.
Yep.
So as we build these buildings, senior center, the town hall, they're all electric.
Yep.
And now you look at this, on this size building, you know, could you go VRF, could you do things, there's other things you could do,
Mhm.
but more than likely, you're heading down the path of something that's carbon-free.
It goes, I think it goes, without saying, we're building this building to be LEEDs compliant, correct?
Yes,
Yes.
LEED compliant, and, you know, the real driver here is the Mass Energy Code, right? We're switching over to the 10th edition building code coming up, and it's one of the strictest energy codes in the country, really high bar. And really what we're seeing to be able to hit the incentive points that MSBA is offering this project, which is 4 points to hit the stretch code and some of the beyond measures, it's gonna be really hard for us to get there without doing an all-electric building. And that's kind of what we're seeing, and that's kind of what we got to map out the cost. One of the things I would suggest when you're talking to them, right, because the big piece of this is third-party funding. And there is some funding that's available out there right now, which Westwood tapped into, right? And they had a whole kind of accounting team, and they were really icebreakers in getting some of that funding. And so now that they've cleared out that path, right, understanding that pathway is really critical for the town side. Because to make this kind of return on investment make sense, right, you need kind of that third-party input. Otherwise, you're paying a premium, right, to get that energy efficiencies, but you're not really gonna get the return on that investment necessarily. So it's balancing those two things, but it's a pretty complicated system. But it is actually one of the, it has an EUI, an energy use index of 25 was the design target, and it's the fastest school to achieve an actual registered 25 EUI that they've done yet. And part of that is the work that that owner has done in, you know, really working the kinks out of that system to get it down and it highly efficient as it was designed for.
And they paid an outside group to be there through the whole process and after they started, and that's the reason they got there so fast. So that's an additional
It's an additional consultant that the owner
consultant
would
fee
hire, right?
that
It's
helped
like-
them get there quickly.
That is a really significant point. I'm sure you've heard this and you probably experienced it with this building, right? It's a much more complicated system than what you're used to, right? And to be able to get the efficiencies out of this, you know, that interplay between the controls systems and what's happening in the engineering side, Westwood did, we were trying to always, everybody is trying in the design community to figure out how best to get the best results for the end user. And so there was a specialty consultant that we used on that project. I think we should talk to that person here to see if you think that's a benefit too, but they worked kind of with the design team, but really with the owner all the way through the process from the initial design until we were done. The contractors are all gone and we're still working on the building to be able to dial in that system so it's efficient and it's user-friendly. And so it was well worth it, and you
Yeah.
probably have some of that
I mean,
feedback.
in a building like this, you do air balancing to get control of it. In geothermal, you're balancing the entire system, so it is more complicated on your startup and getting going and getting everything flowing properly and getting your pressures and everything. So in speaking with the people there that were involved, they can't express how much that money was well worth it to get them to where they are today. So I know it's not an amount we've talked about in this whole thing, and I don't know what the dollar amount is, but it definitely sounded like if we end up going geothermal, that would be well worth its money for the life and longevity of the project.
Did they have any of the, I understand they probably utilized the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, which you would need more of a legal team or an accounting team to do the paperwork, but did they utilize any of the funds and grants that were available through the utility companies, some of the larger ones?
All of the above.
Okay.
They took everything and everything that was
Eversource and all
offered.
of it, yeah.
I mean, a lot of projects that go geothermal, I'm sure Stoneham inclusive, we did Swampscott, and all of them go through some type of utility company that acts as a third-party agent, but some of them have lesser fees or costs associated for the project because it gives them the incentive for the utilization of the you know, the means of energy as well. So like in Swampscott, they used National Grid, and they provided that third-party testing and commissioning as well as design support for free.
Yep.
So,
And just so everybody's clear on where we are in this budgeting process, like you mentioned the federal funds that could be available for this, right? It's a question mark, you know, whether they're there in the future. So from a budgeting standpoint, we budgeted the full cost of geothermal with no third party, right? So anything we do to get that third party benefit, right, it's gonna be bringing our number down. But we wanted to be able to price ourselves in the game so you guys could make that decision one way or another. But we've got this stuff in the budget. The consultant, you know, that you're talking about, we've planned around that. You guys can make these decisions when we get there. Yes, that makes sense for us financially, or no, it doesn't. But you have the opportunity because that's the way we built the budget.
Are you saying that the 194 million figure, whatever that figure is, includes geothermal?
Yes.
no, and I agree with the
Because if they're not,
Inflation
doesn't make
Reduction
incentives.
Act.
Gotcha.
As
Yeah,
the
so we
years
can
go
only go
by, it
well,
might, the
economy.
funding source might get less and less as more projects are coming online utilizing the funding.
Is there a que-
Just
Judy?
to jump in there on the, reduction,
Inflation
Inflation
Reduction
Act.
Act.
You know, the new administration coming in has already said that they will reverse that. So I think we need to tread very lightly on, you know, thinking about any sort of reimbursement from that act.
That's one source.
If that's gonna happen.
Yeah, but that's only one
Right.
source, one funding mechanism that can be of a
Correct,
benefit.
but that was a very large one.
No doubt about it, and you're absolutely correct. We don't know for a fact, right, depending on the timing of when we get to that point. So that's why we budgeted it with it in, so you guys can be able to make those decisions moving forward. Part of this process that we're gonna be doing during schematic design is kind of shaking the trees a little bit on what those other grant opportunities are from Mass Saves, from your local utility. So we'll have those conversations to see, be able, what's out there, and you guys can make appropriate decisions.
When you talk
then.
about our local utility, Wilmington's fortunate to be part of Reading Light as far as our utility rates, but when it comes to rebates,
Right.
that hurts us.
Yep.
So we have a 20-year agreement with them, and they're a great partner, and it keeps our rates low. But when you talk about going against the National Grid and the rebates they can offer, we're nowhere near those.
Yep.
It's not even, sometimes it's more effort than it's worth. And I know in Westwood, I think her name was Gemma or Lemma. Lemma. She was the accounting person for operations only, that was her focus, is getting these grants and then tracking them and finding ways to get in. But in speaking with her, there was a lot of time, and to this day, where she's still working that to get rebates and, you know, grants.
Right.
So it seems to continue well past opening the doors.
Oh, absolutely.
Sorry, Judy, did you?
That's okay. It was just, Dennis covered, I just wanted to mention the fact that we're Reading Municipal Light, which could be a factor in terms of, you know, it's a different experience with the municipal light company of that size, so.
And as part of the sustainability committee that we'll have, early on when Ronnie and I met, I called Reading Light, and they're gonna put somebody on our committee for the subcommittee of this. So one of their engineers will be involved, so that they can at least talk towards what they can offer and what they can do for us. So they'll be on day one.
Will be
Paul?
groundbreakers for that.
And do we have a person, was it a Lemma, Gemma? Do we have
Lemma.
one of these people?
Lemma.
That can identify these resources, or do we have to reach out? Is there a third party that we need to?
Well, fortunately for us, our partners with Dora and Whittier have all the connections at Westwood.
Okay, so we can identify
get-
all the stuff, state level, federal level, all the stuff that's out there, we're capable of doing that?
We can, a lot of the going out and chasing the money side was done by the town side.
Okay.
And, right, they had accounting team and their legal department, you know, chasing that stuff down. So we'd have to be leveraging that here to
Yep.
be able to put some of that on it, depending on when the timing comes out. But
Yeah.
it is a focal point of everybody, all hands on deck to try and
Yeah.
find where we can.
That
get
just
some
sounds like a
third-party
full-time
funding.
job in itself.
It is.
It
There
is.
are though, third-party accounting firms and legal firms that specialize in particular to the IRA funding,
Yep.
that put together all of the documentation, and it isn't a huge cost impact to the town as well. That they'll do all of that paperwork.
It might be
for
something
you.
to consider if that
Yeah.
cost of that offsets the savings that
Yeah,
we're gonna realize.
There's also a third party that we've already been in touch with called Undaunted K-12 that has kind of already started the wheels with us, talking about, you know, the plans, what we're looking at, and we've already met with her twice just to tell her what the project is, and she'll help guide us in that direction.
And they were also involved in that project early on, trying to identify the sources of money, and that's the biggest part is, you know, where are the trees?
Good stuff. I'd like to move on to the next item tonight. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I just want to make a really quick, brief point. This is a great discussion. I just think one more thing needs to be mentioned about natural gas, which maybe it's already all in all of our minds, but bears mentioning, is that it's not just a sustainability thing, it's also dangerous. Remember all those explosions in the upper Merrimack Valley. So it's a reminder to all of us that it's not just eco-friendliness, it's also safety to move on from things like natural gas.
Okay, item number 6, return to conversation that we've had previously, but certainly something that this committee is going to have to make a decision on regarding design bid build or CMET risk.
No, I'll start. So, at our last meeting, I presented the differences between design bid build. I've kind of condensed that presentation into this. So, on the screen, you're seeing some advantages and disadvantages to design bid build. So one of the advantages is competitive bidding, right? So whether it's the general contractor or whether it's the filed sub-bidders, it's a competitive process. So they get a set of drawings. They do not have any input in the very beginning. They're not able to look at them in advance until we submit them. Then they go in and they review the documents, and it's basically the low bidder wins. So previous to bidding, we do a pre-qualification process for all the filed sub-bidders as well as the general contractors. We do the same process for CM at risk as well. So only those individuals who are pre-qualified are able to bid the project. But one of the disadvantages is that with CM at risk, you bring in the CM early, they help with the design process. When you're going with design bid build, they don't. They get the documents, they read them, they give you their best bid, and the lowest bid wins. So qualified does not necessarily imply that it is the best fit. And we see that a lot in design bid build. Although they are pre-qualified because we go through all of their documents and read all of their DCAM evaluations, and as a committee, we vote to move them forward by scoring them. Once you get into the process and they put their bid in, we in the industry know who are the good ones and who are not the good ones. And sometimes it's unfortunate because you get partnered with somebody that maybe isn't the best fit, but they become pre-qualified because they meet all the criteria. You can't just exclude someone arbitrarily. It's actually in the law that you have to have reasoning for it. Next slide, Ronnie. Advantages for the construction manager at risk, as I mentioned it. It's qualifications based. They participate during design, and it all depends on when you bring them in. The reason that we're bringing this to your attention again today is that Doran Whittier has discussed with SMA and the town's leadership about bringing them on during schematic design. It can be very beneficial to the project to bring them on a little earlier than normal, and they give you that estimate during schematic design, which helps get us to the total project budget and a town vote. And that once we're in there, we're comfortable and confident that this is our budget. Some of the disadvantages is that you pay an upfront fee. So you're gonna pay for the design phase for pre-construction, but you're also gonna pay during the actual project a construction manager fee to bring them on and to have them work with you.
Can you tell us what that percentage is?
Oh, geez, sometimes it's between 5 and 8% typically.
Really? I thought it was lower than that.
Yeah, I usually see it somewhere around, 2
Is eight.
to 6%, right? And that's a flat fee that you pay based on construction cost for these services that we're talking about that may provide a benefit to the project.
Only for the, during the pre-construction.
There's two pieces of it. There's a fixed lump sum pre-construction phase, right, that they provide, the estimate for and input into the design, leading up to your end bond vote support. Like, you can bring them to town meeting, and these are the builders, right? These are the people that produce the cost estimate. that's all in the pre-construction fee. Once the project gets voted and we move into the next phase of design, right, that's when you're signing a contract with them. They'll be looking for a percentage fee, somewhere in the range of 2 to 5% on the entire project, which covers them for the balance of the project.
It's what we had for the town hall.
Next slide. So in conclusion, the design bid build is a process that's best suited for ground-up construction, something that your site has no typical issues. It's just an easy process. Construction management risk is more best suited for projects with complicated designs, challenging sites, or strict schedule limitations. Given that the significant fixed price cost liability for subcontract work, a GMP for the CM at risk contract will not typically be set until the entire design is complete. So,
Just to
Can
be
you
clear.
elaborate on that? I'm sorry.
Sorry, we're going back to 2 to 6% is 2 to 6%, but in terms of dollars, that's between just shy of 4 million and nearly $12 million,
Yep.
to be clear. So
Right,
it's a
so-
significant number.
It's
It
a
is.
significant number, and it depends, right, on the 2 to 6, right? The 2 is usually lower on the scale with the larger project, just because of economy of scale. So it's part of the bidding process, right? We ask them for their pricing up front, along with their qualifications, so that piece of it is competitive. But yes, there is a premium to construction management for the services that they provide.
But, I mean, you know, being able to order switchgear, you know, 6, 8 months ahead of time, being able to order steel, lock in on a price now and have the project finished on time, I think that's a huge
Right, so,
consideration.
Absolutely, considering, I mean, when you talk about length of project,
Yeah, yeah.
and we talk about time is money, for sure, it could be that if you're going out and end up 3, 4, 6 months longer project, that yes, you're gonna eat into the exact same amount of $4, $8, $10 million in terms of total costs. But that's a pretty, that's a big number.
Yeah, sometimes there are problems that just can't be measured in dollars, like schedule problems, et cetera, you know.
And I think it's important to realize, just my experience, it could differ, I'm sure, but in the CM at risk, there's less incentive on the contractor to come up with unnecessary change orders.
Yes.
You're working in concert with the person, and when you're working in design bid build, if there's a gray area, the contractor's gonna use it to write a change order to try to get more money. And if it's in CM at risk, there's a lot more of a collaborative process. And so that's something that doesn't come down, you don't know that at the beginning. You never know what kind of change orders they're gonna try to push through. You only know that at the end of the project after you've had to sign all those change orders to see what the impact.
But with that, though, the CM is building into their cost as well as into their budget, all of the allowances and the contingencies and the holds to offset all of the change orders that could be potentially presented. Whereas a design bid build or a general contractor is giving you the lowest, best possible price, and it's up to you as the town and as the owner to hold a contingency, which you're already going to. We could choose to hold, instead of the typical 2%, 3% that the MSBA presents, that for a
5.
new, or 5, we could hold up to 10, 15% so that we could offer us, offset that risk factor, if it's the cost of the project is the main incentive.
Well, you look at the new town hall, we dug 13 test pits, before the project started, similar to what we've just done in the Northfield. And, we found ledge in a couple small, or thought there might be a little ledge in an area, but the rest of it, we dug them down in all random spots, didn't come up with much. We started doing that property, and the site work becomes where a lot of your change orders come in. We hit ledge. Growing up in Wilmington, we either have ledge or swamp. You know, there's those two things in a lot of the area, so, you know, the site work could become very expensive. And like everyone says, you know, ordering the switchgear, ordering the geothermal things, ordering all these long lead items that in ahead of time stale, getting the surprise in the ground changes at, you know, design, bid, build, and CM at risk. I think we've experienced some things in multiple buildings where this was CM at risk. And when we were doing the Section E, which is the gym, they put the footings in and they sunk, and they put the footings in and they sunk, and then, you know, we had pumps going, and all that was additional cost. And it all worked out, but, you know, that's why I think for Wilmington, it may make sense, again, to do CM at risk. That's
But
just
if
my.
we know that already, that either we're gonna hit ledge or swamp, we can just have a higher contingency to offset the costs for the site work.
So, Stephen, yeah,
Do we
Jim.
know over the last 12, 18 months with MSBA, all of the projects that have been approved and bid, what they've been done? Were they design, bid, build, or CM at risk? Do you have that data?
I think it's a pretty mixed bag,
Yeah, it's about
Stephen,
50-50.
of what it is, and it's a different fit for any convenient, for every community. I just want to address the contingency piece. So one of the things, right, the whole name, construction management at risk and guaranteed maximum price, like, what does the guarantee mean, right? Because what they ultimately do is they don't guarantee your price before the design is done, because there's this whole filed sub-bid category, right? And they're not gonna take the risk on that. They're gonna bid all of that stuff out like you have to by law, get that number, put their number for the rest of the project, and then they're gonna say, this is a guaranteed maximum price. Inside that guaranteed maximum price, yes, they do have allowances. They do have holes, right? They have risk management in there to be able to, during the course of a project, something comes up and they're like, yes, we've got that covered, we've got an allowance for it. The owner decides, because inside of their contract, they have their own contingency, a construction manager's contingency. Inside of that contract, you approve whether you approve them using that money for whatever those things are. You have your own separate contingency for unknowns, right? The big piece of this is reimbursement. MSBA will reimburse 1% of the owner's contingency. The contingency that's within the construction manager's project is reimbursed as a construction cost project, right? The bid price is the GMP. Within the GMP are the holds and the allowances, and the contingency that you're deciding what gets paid. So you, in theory, have more of an opportunity to get reimbursed on contingency expenses within a CM guaranteed price contract versus design bid build when you're taking it out of your own contingency, but MSBA is you can spend as much as you want, but we're only reimbursing 1% of it.
And I will say, to Lee's point, when you're talking about holds, allowances, when we're building the GMP, which is the guaranteed maximum price, it's not just the CM gives it to us and we all accept it. We review it thoroughly. The design team reviews it, the OPM reviews it, the entire project team looks at it. And sometimes we say, I'll use a silly one, for example, floor prep. And people will say, oh yeah, just put like 10,000. But we all know that floor prep, most of the flooring contractors know that. So they won't build floor prep into their costs. So we will often say, no, you gotta do a little more than that. You gotta raise that. That's gotta be more like 50,000 based on the square footage of the school. So we do go through the GMP very thoroughly and analyze every single line item that they have to make sure that it is the best value for your community.
Stephen?
So, Mary Ann, from the Finance Committee's perspective, part of me struggles with, on one hand, the openness of the design bid build and how they come in relatively late into the process. On the other hand, the cost of CM at risk is such a large number. Does the Finance Committee have a particularly strong piece of guidance to this committee on what that committee's view is on this topic?
So, because this is the first night that we've actually talked about it, it hasn't been discussed at our committee level. I do have two questions for Lee. The CM at risk, is that price right now in the price of the project, is that built in?
Yes, it is.
So, okay, so that is built in. Is any of that money, I guess, reimbursable through MSBA?
Yes, all of the CM at risk project is reimbursable through MSBA up to their normal limits, the same as it would be with design bid build.
So we would get back a piece of this CMR at risk?
Right, and you can't think of it just the CMR by itself has a 2 to 6% fee, right? Design bid build, their fee's built in, right? It's called overhead and profit, right? So, right, their overhead and profit's like 12%, 8 to 12% on a job, right? And there's other things in there for them versus the straight CM fee. So it's like a little bit of apples and oranges. They both have a fee.
Right, it makes me feel a lot better that it's already into the project amount now. To Stephen's point, this is probably, we which way this committee votes tonight, the finance committee is meeting tomorrow, if this committee approves, and I'm sorry, Art, I don't wanna talk out of term.
You steal my thunder.
But, yeah, the top manager's coming to the finance committee for some of this funding if it's approved. And I think there'll be a lot more talk about that tomorrow.
Christine?
On the design bid build, is there a range of percent that you usually see that gets captured as that overhead that we could say, well, typically they fall in the 1 to 3% range versus the 2 to 6%?
It's hard to separate the exact service from what a CM provides as a service from the design build piece. They do some of it that's in there, but not all of it. And so they bake it right into their, I say 8 to 12% is what I usually see, and they call it overhead and profit. So the overhead's a piece of it. What's the profit piece, right? It's hard, and we don't know. That's the other big piece of design, bid, build. It's all behind closed doors. You sign the contract, and you don't know what happens behind the contract outside of the filed sub-bidders. You know what those numbers are. Everything else, it's in their contract. With a CM at risk contract, it's open book, right? Every little piece in there, you guys have access to. Any expenditures that they make towards the CM project, you can see, and you guys probably know the difference in the requisitions that you get from a CM versus your DBB firms, right? All the paperwork's in there, so it's very open book.
So, sorry, I'm asking a lot, but in terms of the design bid build pre-qualification process, you guys have a lot of experience, and you know the ones that you struggle with and know the ones that are better. There are ways to ask questions like, and this is a bad example perhaps, but what percentage of change orders do you have on your projects? Could be a qualification where if a company that you've worked with and you know they hit with 1,000 change orders and it escalates the cost out of control, you can put that, I believe, into a qualification document to say you're disqualified because you habitually abuse the process. So is that true or not with the pre-qualification process?
I don't think it is,
No.
and I wouldn't go there on that, because change orders, right?
It was an example.
As just using that example though, right? There's many different reasons for change orders, right? There could be holes in the design and something was missed. There could be because we VE'd something out and now you have more money, you want to put it back in, right? So it's hard to disqualify without knowing that.
I guess my point was more broadly, are there patterns of behavior you've seen through your years of experience that you could write a qualification statement that would capture that pattern of behavior that leads you to say, I hate working with that company because they consistently do this. So if I write my qualification in a way that says, we have evidence you do that practice that we don't like, and then you're obviously disqualified because we have evidence that you do these things, I take your experience really, really seriously, and I would think there's a way to write qualification to avoid the companies you don't want to work with because you know they do a bad job. Maybe I'm wrong.
We typically follow a standard format. We don't try and reinvent the wheel with every project. And DCAM usually provides you with the actual documents. What happens is then, once you go into this process, so if we can skip to is it the next slide? Keep going. So this is the CM at risk. But to explain that, doing a pre-qualification, what we do is we send the document out. They fill them in, they send them back to us. We create a pre-qualification committee. It's the same type of a committee that we're going to create for CM at risk if we do that, right? And so it has to be one member from the design team, one member from the OPM, and 2 members from the committee. And so we all participate, and we go through, and there are specific questions that are asked. How many years have you been in business? How many projects have you done in the last 10 years? And you can use those parameters to create like a scoring matrix. Part of it is also they give you references. Now, let's say it's a project that I know Vivian worked on, and I know Vivian's not on here as a reference. I can call Vivian and ask her, hey, you worked with so-and-so. Can you give me a reference on such and such a project? Because I know you worked with them. I see that you're not listed. So you can kind of go outside the box to get that information if there are things that you know of. There are plenty of general contractors and filed sub-bidders that omit things, and they'll just say plausible deniability, like, oh, we didn't realize that we omitted that. Well, we've been in the business long enough, we know what projects you've been on. We hear the word on the street. So we're able to kind of go through those. It's really hard to not pre-qualify someone unless it's egregious. It's really, really difficult. And the AG's office actually has a statute all about that. So it's very challenging to do.
Judy, you had your hand up. Did you have a question, or?
No, my question already was asked by Mary, and I wanted to
okay.
know if the cost estimate had included
All right. Okay.
the CM at risk.
Hall-
Thank
Hall.
you.
I was part of that pre-qualifying process for both the town hall and the senior center project. Make no mistake, I don't think you have to worry a lot about it. When we go to hire a general contractor, we're gonna hire the best one that's out there. We check references, and I called references myself, and I don't think that the general contractors knew that some of the references were gonna say some of the things that they said. So, I don't think you need to get.
Okay, thank you.
And that's why we kind of go out of the box as well, because if you're gonna give a reference on your resume, it's gonna be the best reference you have. But when you know the ones that aren't gonna be the best references, those are the people that you can call.
Dennis?
Yeah, and then like on anything we bid, especially at certain dollar thresholds, you have to be DCAM certified. Now, it's our responsibility for both contractors here to protect the next town. If we didn't like them, they weren't good, to not give them good scores in their DCAM.
Right.
Not every town does it well, and so they stay. So in order to be disqualified, you have to have towns give them bad DCAM ratings, and that's how you eliminate someone. But if they're on the list, it comes down to the due diligence of the people in that subcommittee to check references and ask the right questions. And I truly believe that every organization has someone looking at every bid spec going, okay, where's the loophole? So, because that's gonna be a change order. And they pay someone to find every loophole, because they know they can come in low and then do the change orders, because they know where they are before they bid on the job.
It's not just the CM.
No,
the
but I'm just-
GC, the
I'm every one of them.
subbidders are the
But
best at it.
there are people very savvy in how to find the loophole, so they can come in with a low bid. But when you're looking at this, selecting somebody, it's just as much our responsibility to protect the next people on the way out as the people coming in with their due diligence on the front end.
Greg?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a clarifying question. It sounds like, are we leading towards a vote? I know the agenda says recap, but is this?
Yeah, so thank you for, I was going to bring the same thing up. We do need to make a decision on this. We do need to take action on this. It is not stated for the vote tonight. It's something that we've talked about, though, previously, and talked about this at the last meeting, about the possibility of taking action tonight. So let me put that forward. And Eric, did you want to add anything else about your?
No, I would just say that with respect to taking action tonight, I think it would be helpful if the committee did. As Mary Ann mentioned, I am going in front of the Finance Committee tomorrow, and to have some direction from this committee as to whether or not we're going to go with CM at risk or not before I go there would be helpful. I also think that, if there was a desire to go CM at risk, and most people haven't spoken, so I'm not sure where the committee is leaning, but if there is a desire to go that way, I would just ask that if we're going to have a motion, that it says something to the effect of to go with the CM at risk at such time as the town identifies the funding source, so that we're not tied to a specific date. But I think that would be something I would.
That motion.
Well, was that a motion? Can I?
Mr. Chair, if I could just put, if the town manager just wants to give us your recommendation.
So personally, I think for a project that's this size and complexity, given the kind of the challenges we may see with timeline, I think a CM at risk probably makes sense, because we can get things off the table.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Thank you. Moving that, discussion.
Can you walk us through the schedule if you were to go CM at risk and if you were to go design bid build? What are the differences between the schedule?
Lee, you want to jump in?
Sure. The long, and we have lots of schedule we can get into, and the detail of the big piece of this, right? The big takeaway, CM at risk, the benefit is, for me, is to get them into the estimating process during this phase.
Sorry.
And in order to do that, right, to get them into this phase, we have to procure them. It's like a 12-week process, right? And we have a couple of slides, if we could switch back, just to procurement.
Sorry, if you could go back for just 1 second, I was looking at the schedule. Is the intent to have 2 separate move-in on either option?
So the move-in dates, and I should clarify this because I know this came up as a question. So, kind of the phasing, if you will, is that the new building gets constructed. Grades 4 and 5 move into the new building because we need to demo the existing building to finish the parking. That's where all of the parking is located.
Right.
And we wouldn't be able to move the pre-K through 5 full population in when the building is done because there's no parking for them. So we would not be able to fit staff parking and the circulation would not fully be constructed. So those pieces would need to be completed for the entire population to move on site.
In either
scenario.
In either scenario.
Well, what I
That
will
doesn't
say,
happen.
though, bringing on a CM, they may be able to work with us in order for us to figure out temporary parking.
Right.
So that the whole building could move in at once. And that is another benefit of bringing the CM on early, is that they understand the logistics of the property. And they could potentially create a temporary parking lot while the old building is being torn down, and then the new building.
Does that answer your question, Vivian, for the question on schedule?
I guess, help me understand why, besides the parking, I understand that part of it, to tear down and build a parking structure or parking area. There's no other feasible way to move all the students in at the same time? It just feels a little bit wrong to move half the, like, not even half, 2 classes, 2 grades in.
Those 2 grades are in the north, though, so that's, makes the most sense to empty the building. So it's, everyone else is at the Woburn Street or the middle school in west, so in that sense, I think it makes sense.
So it might be possible to come up with some temporary parking solution or off-site parking solution and shuttle buses, like, I mean,
We're giving you the most conservative scenario that we can right now to be able to identify the differences. Like, you see where the green star is on the screen, right? That's the advancement of the building completion between, design, bid, build, right? Because you're able to start work before the design work gets done. And to the savings and the offsettings of the CM fee, right? General conditions per month on this size project is about $200,000 a month, right? So 6 months early, on pencils down for the contractor is a lot of money. So like we've been saying, time is money. Anything we can do to try and shorten that construction duration is going to save money. To your point about the move, we are being conservative about this, and maybe as we go through this process and logistics, we can try and figure out something to do one move and have some temporary, right? We have to get a certificate of occupancy for the building, and there's a whole bunch of things in play for that.
So if I could have a follow-up on the CM at risk, you're anticipating when is the final move-in date for completion? Sorry, I can't see.
So I believe technically it would, I'm gonna turn because my screen is really small.
It's like May 2029.
So it's towards the end of that school year, so that school year goes away, and realistically, they don't move in until September of that school year. And it can fall within the same timeline during a design bid build as well. You're not saving much on the schedule, is I guess. At the end, when all the student population moves in, you're still moving the students in at the same time.
But you're talking about the summer when they can actually move in and set up and the teachers have time versus here where you're looking at like February and there's no transition time for them to be
Christmas
able to
vacation.
move in. You
Christmas
get like a week
vacation.
versus the summer.
I want to
right?
move to, Judy, you had your hand up, and then Stephen.
So I was gonna ask about what the net difference is between the two in terms of timeline that we gain. Obviously, I'm familiar with both, and I'm familiar with the projects that we've explored both, or have gone down both paths. My question is regarding getting, like, right now, we have an estimated range. Does the CM at risk give us a better estimate, if you will, to be able to sell this project at town meeting and feel that we have more credible numbers that can stand up in the court of public opinion as people are voting on the project? Will we have a better potential financial story to go to the ballot box and to go to a town meeting, which could lead to a better chance of a prevailing vote based on more credible, concrete numbers in a bigger way in people's professional opinion?
My personal view is yes, right? I think it's, if you can get the contractor to have some skin in the game, right, and they're putting the estimate together and they ultimately are gonna build it and face the owner, I do think that you have a better served number coming to a vote for the community to move forward with. It's not just gonna be their number, right, to keep them honest. The design team does that. We reconcile with them to come up with what the actual number is gonna be. But I do think it's a better process myself, having the builder involved in the estimate.
Stephen?
So just to help me understand, the 3 phases versus 2 phases of the construction piece, part of what's interesting is phase 2 of the design bid build, phase 2 of the CM at risk starts February of '27, and the overall project ends in April of '29, whereas in the other one, the phase 1 starts in February of '27, the same date, and ends in October of '29. So that implies that there's 6 months worth of work that can be done in the pre-work phase, is that accurate? And then the follow-on piece is, so in both cases, the pre-K through 3 it's either April of '29 or October of '29, it's those, at the end of those dates.
Right.
There isn't further construction that follows with site work and things that follow after that?
There is, but it's a reduced amount of people on site, right? So those general conditions costs go down. As fast as we can get the contractors off the site, the more money we're gonna save.
But the construction end dates, the dates you have here at the end of the purple bars on both, those are move-in dates for the rest of the school population. They're not the end of the project. So there's phase 3 or 4 or whatever
Yep.
of construction that's the final site work and final, okay. So that's, okay.
So
Nick?
that's with, that's in the purple bar. That site work that you're talking about, that's
So-
that last bar,
So,
the
but-
last
but-
purple.
Okay, that's why I was asking.
Green
for
star.
clarification. So on the top
Green
one,
Star is the move-in.
well, Green Star's the move-in for the first group.
Right.
Not the second group.
The
There's no
second
second
group-
Green Star. And so the second Green Star, I thought, would be on April of '29 for the top, and October of '29 for the bottom, which is the end of the purple bar, which implies there's no more site work after that. So I'm confused about the end dates. Either they move in earlier and their site work follows and ends at the end of the purple bar, or it's another 3 or 6 months on both those, or how long would the site work follow after the kids move in?
So after grades 4 and 5 move in?
No, the
No,
second
you're
group.
talking about the second. So once the pre-K through grades 3 would not move in until all of the site work is done.
All of it?
Yeah.
Ah,
Unless we work to figure something else out. So as you mentioned, this is conservative to assume that, you know, we have all the parking on site that's needed, all the circulation is in place, and that way we're not moving them in and they're still living through construction, right?
Well, when you say all site work, I think that's a good clarification. We're talking about parking and, you know, site, logistics around the building. We're not talking about trees and plants, and those things can still happen.
okay, so some of those would follow.
Right.
Go to Nick first and then back to Vivian.
Just, so, I want to go back to cost, because there's been a lot of discussion of all these qualifying kind of ideas around change orders and everything. Would you say that more often than not, design bid builds come in demonstrably cheaper than the CM at risk proposals, like in the majority of cases? Or is it really dependent on the exact project?
It's a hard question, because there's not a lot of firm data just because of the way the contracts are written. I think the initial cost, if you look overall historically with MSBA, design bid build will come in cheaper. But what is not published by MSBA, right, is the conclusion of a CM at risk job, right, when they have their contingency left over, right, and they sign it over by a change order, giving it back to the owner, right, that doesn't come out in MSBA's number until after the audit is completed, which can be years and years and years after the project is finished. So there is money going back at the end, which isn't accounted for. But you see that in design bid build because it's one number.
So just clarifying what you're saying, in the CM at risk process, the town can get money back by 2030, say, that was not used, but that, so to me, it sounds like basically like that, in the court of public opinion, may not convince as many people to say, we'll get some money back of some indiscriminate amount, you know, like.
No one can guarantee, you know, what's going to be left over at a contingency. But just historically in the projects I've worked on, they haven't spent all of the construction contingency. They've had savings on buyouts for, you know, what they estimated in their guaranteed price versus what the actual bids came in for like concrete, you know, stuff that's not filed sub-bids. You get the savings of all of that because it's an open book process. We're going to see the bids, we're going to see what they had. That money all comes back at the end once we finalize everything. So there's a potential to get some CM contingency back, there's a potential to get some of the buyouts back. So it's not apples and oranges, right? Because those costs you're comparing to DBB where it's all done up front. So it's really hard to give you a data set.
Sure.
My gut feeling is that CM does come with a premium cost for a level of service that you don't get with DBB.
Right, okay. Thank you.
To kind of go back to your point about the cost, and Judy, the issue you raised in going to town vote, I think that's a little bit of a slippery slope, only because there's information from the core program given in October and in August from MSBA that either one have also come in over budget. Whether it's a CM at-risk project or a design bid build, as well as under budget. So it's a little bit, I wouldn't necessarily use the analogy of like, we're gonna get a better final price to go to town meeting and town vote for. And then when we actually finalize the GMP, and if it comes out higher, as in some of the cases here that, you know, CMR has come in higher, I would hate to go back to the town and then explain we ended up coming higher as a result of X, Y, and Z. There is data on both different projects, and as the team described, it's a little bit of a mixed compilation of whether the towns have, or cities have decided to go design bid build or CMR, and there isn't really one way that identifies that if you go CMR, you're gonna have a lower price at the end, or, you know, the chances are for design bid build, they tend to come in lesser than the others, but it's a little bit of.
I think they're all project specific.
I'll tell you my experience with CM at R, okay? This building came in on price, on budget, and on time. And the town hall building is, I think, what, 2 weeks over, something like that? But definitely on budget, and we're able to put a lot of things back into it, slate floors and things like that. Beautiful. The senior center is, what, 2 months over, I think, at this point. We don't have the
Correct.
switch gear coming in, the building's gonna be done, we're not gonna have the electrical panel for the building. The CM at risk is your partner, and it's in their best interest to get that job done on time and on budget. And that's all I have to say about that. I'm prepared to make the motion.
There is a
I
motion.
was gonna go back
I
to
think there's a motion on the
the
table.
motion and
We're
a
in
second.
discussion right now.
Okay,
Right, we're in
so,
discussion, yeah.
all right, that's all I have to say.
And just for the record, the motion, could we read back that motion, or could you state that motion?
There's the motion to move forward with the CM at risk for the project, subject to the town identifying the funding, if we're gonna go prior to or during the schematic.
Has
Can
that
I
been,
ask one quick question? How much more is the project inflation if we bring the CMR on down versus when we go for funding?
we don't have the money to do that.
We
Is
don't.
it
No, we don't.
still the same amount, or are we incurring more of a cost bringing them on early?
I'm trying to understand, Marianne, that question a little bit better. The cost, the fixed price they have for their pre-construction ahead of the vote? Is that, you saying, is that cheaper or more expensive now? I think, you know, that's the competitive aspect of the qualifications and bidding, right? They usually bid the pre-construction services low, right, to try and give them an advantage to get in the door. So I actually see it as bringing them on early, you get economy in what you would normally get for those services during pre-construction, because it's in a competitive environment. That make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion and we have a second, so we need to vote, correct? Roll call, please.
Diane Allen,
Yes.
Greg Bendel,
Yes.
Kate Bissell,
Yes.
Glenn Brand,
Yes.
Kevin Kyra,
Yes.
Michael Comosio,
His microphone's not on.
He just turned it off. Michael, can you repeat your response if you can hear us?
He doesn't have a microphone.
we'll come back to him. Justin Couchet,
Yes.
Mary Ann Galesso,
Yes.
Nicholas Golden,
Yes.
Christine Hollern,
Yes.
Dennis Kelly,
Yes.
Paul Melorani,
Yes.
Craig Minor,
Yes.
Judy O'Connor,
Yes.
Christine Pendergast,
Yes.
David Ragsdale,
Yes.
Paul Ruggiero,
Yes.
Stacy Scott,
Yes.
Eric Schlegel,
Yes.
Stephen Turner,
Yes.
and myself, no.
Can you ask Michael?
Michael Comosio,
My headset died. I'm back on computer audio. Yes.
is your vote yes?
Yes.
Okay, that
Motion
clearly
carries.
passes, thank you.
Carries.
Anything else to wrap that up? All set?
I would just add, that we do have, and it's sent out, I think in your packet, a schedule for the actual procurement piece of CM. Obviously contingent on you getting green light to go, but once you give us that, I think, the first steps are forming the CM selection committee, which is kind of the 4 members of this group. And we've got a bunch of documentation to put together, RFQs, contract documents for your legal counsel review. But we have a process put up. We should be able to get them on board prior to us issuing the cost estimate materials, so that they should be on board and under contract to be able to provide that service.
Okay, thank you for the discussion and the contributions. I know that's a lot to take in, but appreciate your patience as we work through that. The next item tonight is discussion correspondence, new items number 7. We'll move to new items first. As mentioned earlier, we had a discussion with the leadership team. We've had a few discussions, of course, and around this committee around the gym, the gymnasium, and specifically a couple of things. One, a request previously around the possibility of moving that gym to the exterior or the outside wall. And then, of course, the looming question around the size of the gym, 12,000 versus 6,000. You recall that we have a decision that's been made by this committee of a pre-K to 5 school with a full-size gymnasium, 12,000 square feet, and the location is on an exterior wall. So our design team has been working hard to try and put all that into perspective, and tonight we're going to give you an update on this. In our conversation, the final piece I'll mention with the leadership team earlier today and asking of Lee and his team, this is a decision that this committee needs to make by December 3rd at our next meeting to finalize the gym, both in terms of size and location. So with that, Ronnie, are you taking it from here?
David? Okay, so as a refresher, this is where we left at the PSR, preferred schematic submission, where the gym was located central in the building layout. And so what we did is we looked at 2 alternative options, understanding that the study of the gym location on an exterior wall. So you'll see on the screen, you'll have on the left is what we submitted for the preferred schematic report. Alternate 1 looks at rotating the gymnasium so that if for whatever reason there was a decision that was made to go back to the 6,000 square foot gymnasium, it has oriented the gymnasium so it could be done that way in the east-west format. This does make the building longer, so one of the big differences on the site plan is, I'm just gonna grab a laser here, is on the site plan right here in the back, the turnaround for the bus is pushed slightly north so that it can accommodate the bus turnaround, even though the building is longer, and so you lose a little bit of green space on the north side. And then again, as I said, the gym is oriented more east-west instead of the original north-south configuration. More or less the location of where the cafeteria was is now where the gym is located, and the cafeteria becomes more of an internal space, so it is kind of landlocked. It does lose ability for the natural light because before it was on an exterior wall. And then as we get into the site plans, I'll go into some of the impacts in the building as well. In alternate 2, we've located.
Can I just pause you there for
Sure, go for it.
1 sec? So this particular challenge we've been focused on for a couple weeks, and our understanding of what you were trying to do, I think, is the important piece here, and that's why we have 2 different alternates. And so the motion that you guys passed with the approval of the PSR said 12,000 square foot gym placed on an outside wall. So we've accomplished that in both of these, but trying to read the tea leaves, we're trying to figure out, well, what was driving the building committee to want to move this to an outside wall? And our interpretation was that you were looking for potentially a cost relief valve on the project budget. And so the direction to us to say, put that from interior landlocked space to an outside wall, and this is just, and I'm asking this question because this is what we thought, was that you were looking for the potential sometime during this phase, if the budget was high, that you could say, we don't need that 6,000 square foot community piece, let's lop it off and we're back to 6,000 square feet and move forward. That was kind of how we interpreted that question from you, but we weren't positive. So alternate one is our reaction to that, where you'll see that half of that gymnasium is really outside of the footprint of the school. So we've kind of left that out there potentially as a target, and you can say, if I cut that gym in half, you can see that back wall of the building, right? So that was our interpretation of what we thought you might be trying to do. But we weren't positive, right? Because we did vote for a 12,000 square foot gym. We did go kind of out of our way with the community to say, this doesn't need it educationally, we need it for community use. Here's what the cost differences are between it and moving forward. So we also came up with alternate two that really didn't so easily. It kept 12,000 square feet and it just moved it to an outside wall, assuming that there was a program change that you were looking to do. That one, alternate two, isn't as easily cut in half, like take out the missing tooth piece, right? So again, this is us asking you kind of what was the intent behind directing us to put it to an outside wall. That's one, because what we're trying to do, right, we weigh pros and cons of these things. And so we've got a pretty good list of potential compromises that have been made to that first floor plan that we've gone through with all the users, and the adjacencies are right. And so when we start moving the pieces around, the deck chairs on the deck, we compromise some of that. So we're gonna point what those are in these plans. And you weigh those compromises against what's the benefit. And so we're trying to figure out exactly what the benefit was from the perception of the committee. Was it a cost control item that you were just looking to lop off? And if that was the case, that's kind of alternate one. And I would just caution you that we do need to make a decision on this, because you guys have heard me ad nauseum before talking about this. The floor plan was driving really our schedule. So the faster we can get to a floor plan, we can get the engineers involved and move the process forward. So I'm just throwing out that for partial conversation before we get into it. Do we understand you correctly?
So, presuming you understood correctly that it was a cost relief valve, if alternate one, and if the cost relief valve is executed, you've got this weird finger sticking out then once you've cut off half the gym. What do you, is that architecturally reasonable to have the music and art rooms kind of sticking out there as
No, we would have to fix that when you made that decision, right?
So
But we were trying to get most of the pieces outside. So if you made that kind of focused decision, we're not messing around with everything else in the building, because there's so much that's interdependent on each other. So we're trying to isolate it as much as possible to be able to give that, that was our intent.
So,
As far as, that was my intent, in case the project comes in way over budget, that it would be something that we could maybe revisit to save, millions of dollars. And that was my intent when I voted for it, if that helps you any.
Sorry.
To respond to that, it does help us. We kind of guessed right in what that is. The big part of this, right, and you've heard me talk about the budget and the fact that we've tried to set your budget up to give you as many options as possible to make decisions to go down. We never like to set your budget and have it go up when you start adding things. So we've baked into all of these things in there now, geothermal, the CM, all of that stuff. The big difference here is, what are we trying to do? Because we already know what the numbers are, right? This is a scope change. We're trying to establish a budget for you at the end of this phase. And then we expect at the end of this phase that our number is going to be very close to the number that we gave you before. That's our mission as a project team, is to give you numbers and keep them consistent from phase to phase. So we fully expect.
Well, Lee, just to back up a little bit, we don't really have, we just have a range at this point. We don't have an actual number, correct?
Correct.
Because I know we're like 170, 178 million to 198 million. So we have an actual range, we're not really narrowed down to the exact cost.
That is absolutely correct, and we expect you to be in that same range, but with a much finer point, right? I don't expect to come out of this with a number outside of our range at this point, right? Because that's problematic. So all I'm saying is that the exercise of budget control based on going from 12,000 to 6,000 square feet, I don't know that that's actually going to help, because you're going to have to make that decision now while we have this big range, right? We don't have that completely nailed down. We're not going to be able to wait until the end of schematic design and get an estimate with the CM and then decide, all right, we don't want the 12,000, we want the 6,000. Because all of this work for the 4 months that we've done and all of the money that you're expending on engineering and design, that's going to get changed, right? And we don't have a lot of time to do that.
Judy?
I just wanted to put it out there, I understand Mary Ann's point, and I understand why the motion was made the way that it was. What I took out of the past experience is that there was varying opinions in terms of which preferred option, more so than the unified response that I felt that I saw in the surveys about having the 12,000 square foot gym. I felt there was more consensus on that, separate from the preferred option to have the bigger gym, and that there was a bona fide committee need. At some point, all of this is a risk in terms of the type of product that we bring to town meeting, and if the residents will support it at the town meeting and at the ballot box. If we have to call it a ball or a strike sooner than later, I think we should stick with the 12,000 square foot gym, and I think that we should build the best school with the best model and the best layout that gives the best cafeteria experience, the best classroom experience, and make sure that the adjacencies of the given rooms are harmonious to each other, such for noise control, for flow throughout the building, for all the programmatic needs, the student needs, and I think would just respectfully request that people keep an open mind to that. I'm not insinuating that cost isn't a factor and that we should just build it big and build it the most expensive. I'm not suggesting that, but I'm not liking the illustrations, in my opinion. I like the PSR site plan that's there, that we started with, better than the two that are shown. I like the preservation of more green space. I'm really concerned about the traffic patterns and the flow of the vehicles. I think that whatever we can do to help that, because I think that's gonna be something that's gonna impact people's willingness to vote for this, is to understand the traffic consequences in that area. For me, I supported this particular option, but my biggest concern was traffic, which I know hasn't been really shared with what the traffic studies are. But I think whatever we can do to keep the site plan with the building format tight and to allow for more traffic flow around, on site is gonna make this project more viable for people to accept and vote in. And I think if elongating the building is going to impact the flow for pedestrian and car and bus traffic, I think that we're taking steps backwards when we know, in my opinion, that the community embraced the 12,000 square foot. I think taking other schools offline and taking those other community resources potentially offline will have a gym impact that can be used for a myriad of different things beyond just gym classes. I think, to not build it and wish that we did after the fact for the years that we'll be without it, I think, it's a cost-benefit analysis and it's a risk either way, but I think we should stick with the original PSR site plan.
To give this a fair shake, I think it's good that we actually walk you through the next slide, which is the floor plans, to talk to you about some of the compromises that would have to be made to the plan to be able to make this work. And I'm not saying they're insurmountable. We've reviewed them. There's a couple of changes in there that aren't ideal from what we've talked about up to this point. But if you could swap to the first floor plans. But so these are all the floor plans. The orange box obviously is the gym. And the biggest change, right, and you guys had mentioned this before, like, how are you guys gonna execute this? Are you gonna swap the cafeteria and the gym space? So that's essentially what we had to do here. So the big green space, which in the PSR plan, right, has some nice western exposure, right, to be able to daylight that space, it becomes landlocked where the gym is. Typically, when we have a gym space versus a cafeteria, we like to light the cafeteria, not so much the gym. So that's a big change, right, is now the cafeteria is right in the middle of the building. There's not as much opportunity for us to daylight that as it was when it was on the outside wall. That was number one. The other piece that you'll see is, the blue box that Ronnie's pointing to, that's the administration and the front entrance. That had to slide down so that you see that blue box has changed a little bit. The entrance has changed. That also impacts what happens above, obviously. When you see the gym in our original plan where we had it in the middle, the gym's on the first floor. It's supporting space that's up on the second floor that we have built over part of it, right, to house some of the support spaces for those grade levels. And then there's a third floor up on top of that. When we move that gym space out, the cafeteria obviously isn't the same size as that. We had to infill that second floor with program space. So we had to move the STEM space that was down directly close to the library, which we also heard from the staff was great. We heard from MSBA, that's great to have those two next to each other. We actually have to pull those apart, and Ronnie, you can show where those are. The yellow box being the library, the STEM classroom now has to go across the corridor because we're infilling that space to be able to support the program that we have up on the third floor. That was one piece. The OTPT that we had on the first floor, occupational therapy, physical therapy, which usually we try and locate right at the gym floor, the same level because they're using those spaces. That also had to move upstairs into that little connection bar to be able to infill that space to support the program upstairs. So you can kind of see it's like, squeezing a water balloon. We squeeze it here and it pops out over there, right? That's what we're, working with through this whole thing. So the big things that I mentioned there, right? The STEM room pulled apart from the library, OTPT moving upstairs. I think the flex classroom had to move, not deal breakers from the program, but they're not ideal because they want to be in different places. And the cafeteria doesn't have, daylighting opportunity. The benefit is, right, potential for the cost saving piece if the gym's on the exterior wall, then lop that off. So for us, we're trying to always weigh those things, like what are we getting out of this by making this big shift of the gym versus what are the compromises we're making, and is it worth, that move? So that's the way we're looking at this. We're happy. We think we've made a plan that can work. Any one of these we think can work. It can work, Judy, to your point of site circulation, some of them better than others, but looking at these, we spent some time to make sure that what we're presenting to you, we think we can make work. From a cost-saving perspective, is there any cost differences between these? To be able to support that second floor space over the gym, right? The gym's a high volume space. We would have to beef up some of the structure over part of that. So there's an increased cost of steel to be able to support that. So moving the gym to an outside wall, we may see a savings on steel tonnage, but we also might have to change some of the floor-to-floor heights to be able to get that stuff to work. So at this level of detail, we can't tell you that there's a big cost savings one way or another on these things. We're all the same.
Greg?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So cost aside, I'm just trying to think about, work through, like, if the gym's on an exterior wall, are there advantages to the community programming, which we heard loud and clear was important, and that's one of the reasons I think we voted for it. Advantages, disadvantages there, I mean, clearly in the evening, we have the capability of locking off parts of the building that, people aren't gonna be wandering on the way to a rec basketball game, but advantages, disadvantages there, I mean, I see this being used for multiple, like, this clearly could be one of our polling locations in the future, so is there an advantage to having it to the exterior for a ball game, for an election, or I'm trying to work through that in my mind, cost aside.
Cost aside, so the big pieces, right, that we've been working through this whole thing is to be able to create a public zone of the building where public spaces are located, right, and then be able to lock down student sections, academic sessions. In each of these iterations, we were able to keep that. So to your point is, is there a benefit for community access if the gym is where we had it initially versus putting it on outside? We don't see that. You still have access publicly. Those are locked down spaces, so the public only has access to that public portion. So we don't see any really perceived benefit one way or the other for the community access piece on that.
Thank you.
Where would the public enter, and how would it be locked down?
Sure. So the main entry is where the public can enter in, and they would get to, say, the gymnasium. The lockdown points are at the entrances to each of the wings. So those are those thresholds where those get locked down, and that's why anything that's in the top half of the plan is considered on the public side. If they are coming in for any of alternate 1 or alternate 2, they would still potentially use the main entry, and then the lockdown, the security thresholds would again still be at each of the entries of the wing.
Do they have access to the,
Exterior?
no, I mean, there's blue and there's purple
Sure.
on the side of the gym area. Do they have access to get in that area? I'm talking about the PSR. Yes, right, we have, so,
Right here?
yeah, and also the blue in the back.
So, let me go to the site plan real quick to help answer that question. So, right now, if you were having an event, the parking would be in the front of the building, so typically they would want to enter in from one of the front points. The point that you were showing is actually on the back side of the building, so there wouldn't be any parking.
But I think,
in that
Kevin,
area.
to your point, they do have access to that whole space. That blue patch you're seeing is the administration suite.
Oh, here.
So it would
So
be,
the public would have,
it would be
would
locked,
have to
But it'd be
pass
locked
by.
down.
it would pass by, it would be locked off, correct.
Sorry.
No, I agree with what Judy was saying. You know, I thought at our last meeting, we voted on the 12,000 square foot gym. I thought that was a done deal.
Yeah, I thought so too.
And, you know, I listened to the AD and the rec director and the needs that they have. And I understand Mary Ann's point, having it on an outside wall in case we had to go down on 6,000 square feet. I think that's gone by at this point, and I think we need to stick with the 12,000 square feet. We're losing gym spaces, it is. I see the design, we're even losing a baseball field, it looks like, and some field space. So I would be in favor of the PSR, for whatever that's worth.
Thank you. Mike, I think you, go ahead.
I just, really quickly, and it's kind of moot now because I agree with what's already been said, but was this done with any of the user groups? I know you mentioned that PT and OT would get kind of shuffled around a little bit, and I think that was part of the user group discussions. Were they involved? Was anyone from, you know, phys ed involved in looking at these options and saying, you know, yes, we like one versus the other?
No, Lee and his team finessed this, worked this through. Leadership group, our leadership team took a look at this. We have the takeaways from those groups, though, in terms of ideal kind of flow and adjacencies, location, for example, again, the STEM room is proximity to the library. So this would be an adjustment. If the committee decided to go in one of these other, the alternate, this would be an adjustment. I don't think anything here is insurmountable, certainly from an educational standpoint, and it has adverse, you know, anything that we're talking about here is going to be significantly improved over what we've got right now. So,
Kate's got a question.
Kate, yep.
Just to follow up on that question, I would say, certainly from the Wildwood perspective, I would not support that change to OT and PT to the second floor. I think we were very thoughtful about placing those close to the pre-K entranceway in the first round of design, because we have students entering for drive-in services to receive OT and PT. Those students in particular have motor struggles, and to have them coming in for services and then have to access their services on the second floor does not seem to be in the best interest of their programming.
Thanks, Kate. David, I think you were maybe next.
I would just like to suggest, or at least see if there's maybe objection to voting on this issue tonight, given the speed with which we're saying that there are a lot of advantages. I know you said that we need to have the vote by the next meeting, but it seems if we can do it tonight, that would be even better.
You guys would get an extra gold star from me.
Steven?
Yeah, I did echo a lot of what Judy said. I appreciate that. Fundamentally, the gym, from an educational perspective, deferring to the community and what the community's voice has said is towards the larger gym. And educationally, the thoughtfulness that went into the first design, not saying the other ones don't have a lot of thought in them, it seems to be a much better overall design and much fewer compromises to it. And so I think from that perspective, the original design makes sense. If is what the town supports in terms of the gym, I think I very strongly support sticking with the PSR first plan.
Vivian, last word, and then we'll talk about the next
I
steps.
would agree on all of the echo fronts, especially the fact that, yes, we want to include the community in the spaces, but first and foremost, this is a school project, and this is a school, and having the daylighting in the cafeteria, I think, is extremely beneficial for students that are in classrooms majority of the day. To be able to have that 1 hour or half hour, 20 minutes in a well-lit environment that's different is very, very beneficial for their learning. So I would agree in keeping the PSR layout.
I'm sorry,
Nick,
just one
yeah.
quick question. Leah, in all of those designs, why are the two buildings in the front crooked? Why aren't they straight? Why do you have them angled? Just for the sake of angling? I think they don't look right to me.
Yeah, no, part of that is to create some of those extended learning spaces that have some opportunities to have access to natural light and create zones within. If we line these all up and you'd have your typical buildings where you've got a whole bunch of classrooms and a corridor running down the middle, that is something that we're trying to change in the way we do this educational plan. We're trying to create some spaces in that corridor that can be used for educational. So that's why we've taken them and split them out a little bit to be able to widen the corridor, to be able to have some of those learning spaces that spill out from the classroom into that space. So our corridors become more usable.
Well, wait a minute, we don't want our kids in the corridors. Right now, we're told that kids are in closets. So why would we want to use the corridors as educational space?
Because they're not going to be the corridors that you are thinking of like you've seen in all the existing elementary schools. These are spaces that are actually set up with furnishings, direct supervision from the classrooms, technology. It's an extension of the classroom space, right? And these are in locked down grade level communities. So each little wing that you see, right, on this particular floor is kindergarten and pre-K are their own little entities. So it's like a little house concept, and they don't have long corridors. We have, different openings for teachers to be able to have students breaking out, working in smaller sections, working on projects and we took tours with staff of a whole bunch of new MSBA buildings that have this feature to be able to talk through some of the educational advantages of them. So that's why they're in the project to begin with, to be able to realize that architecturally, we can't have these long, straight corridors, of the 1960s that we were designing. So that's why you see there's still opportunity for us as we're fine-tuning solar orientation and we're doing cost to be able to see, if we straighten those out a little bit. But that was our intent, is to be able to have some of the educational space still outside of the classroom. These aren't like corridors that you typically remember, right? They're fully furnished and utilized as educational space.
And so can you have multiple classes out in the corridors at the same time? I mean, are they going to be able to pay attention to a teacher who's talking? Can they hear the other group? I'm trying to get the concept here.
In some cases, yes. We have some, you see them scattered throughout the building. So some features will be right outside of a classroom and have direct supervision to that classroom teacher. So if they're working on small group work, and right now we have problems with there's not enough space, so students are working in groups in corridors or closets. We're trying to activate that space to not design it like a corridor, to be able to use that space which was only used for circulation and walking before. We're trying to double use that space as educational space and for circulation. And so it does have direct supervision to teachers. It has resource spaces and support spaces that are right outside that for pull-out and inclusion spaces. So, I'm talking at it from the designer's perspective, but from an educational perspective, you can give us some, of your feelings and the feedback that you guys have heard on your tours.
100%. And these resembled, and these were seen firsthand through building visits for modern, more contemporary schools, where the opportunity is so rich there to be able to spill out from the classroom into a learning environment that is more than a classroom, more than a closet, but very supportive of small group instruction, push-in services. There's a whole host of things that would be able to be achieved. And folks who went on the tours were able to see that in many of the schools that they visited back in this fall of last year. So, Nick, last point, and then we'd like to...
Yeah, no, I apologize. What Kate was saying about the OTPT, is that true of both alternates, 1 and 2, that It's been moved upstairs? And that was unavoidable?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I was inclined to want it on the outside of the building, but moving those kids upstairs makes no sense.
Yeah, one last question. In addition to the additional 6,000 that is not going to be considered from MSBA, what other portion of the building is there any other portion of the building that is not going to come under MSBA reimbursement?
There is, and that's part of the process we're working out with them through this phase. So we have a basic understanding at the end of schematic design, spaces that they're going to fully support and be reimbursable, and spaces that are outside of their purview and would be 100% local share. So we can state that specifically. Right now, we're kind of guessing at it with them about typically they do these spaces and they don't. There are some spaces in here that are over what their allowances are, which is typical on every project. Special education is different, in this school than it is in some other community. So that is part of this process, is for us to be able to identify which portions of the project the MSBA is going to reimburse for and which ones are 100% local. We took a first pass at that when we gave you the numbers for local share with the PSR estimate. For instance, that 6,000 square feet for the gym, that's just the net 6,000 square feet, right? And you may remember me saying that there's a multiplier on that contributes to wall thicknesses, right? Chases, corridors for circulation around it. It's 1.5. So that 6,000 square feet is actually 9,000 square feet is its contribution. So there's 9,000 square feet that's reimbursable, and that's what we factored into your local share. So we've taken that first pass when we delivered that local share to saying this is what typically we see MSBA reimbursed for, and this is what we don't. But we don't have a final answer, and that's what we were trying to allude to with that local share. This is our guess of what the local share is until we sit down with the project budget and scope agreement with MSBA, and they say, this is what we're willing to sign up for and do it in writing. So that's what we're working out in this phase right now.
And that's when they'll give us what percentages that they're going to.
Exactly.
Thank you.
I mentioned earlier that Lee and his team need a decision by the committee by December 3rd. We talked earlier in the leadership group if they could even leave with a sense of the committee tonight. But that said, if there's a will to make a motion to make this change now, we can certainly do that. David?
I move to continue with the PSR design.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
Discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Full disclosure, I'm going to support this because I think it's the right move. But just through you, Mr. Chair, if I could request through the OPM that now this is the second vote on our agenda that wasn't on our agenda. This is significant movement by this committee, and I'm scarred from being criticized in the past over agenda items, and I don't want to see that happen to this committee. It's also not fair to the public that we've now made two major decisions that they weren't aware of. One was listed as a recap, and this particular vote is not on the agenda at all. So I just want to put an air of caution and request that through you, but I'm prepared to support this.
And to piggyback onto that, I would much rather see these materials before this meeting.
Fair enough. So,
In the future.
Yep.
I'll take responsibility and apologize to that. We're cranking away as fast, and our clock ends and says send agenda items off. We keep going. We got to a point where we had enough, and we said I think they'd like to see it, and so that's why we asked the leadership group, do we think we can put this in front of the SBC? If you're not comfortable making a decision, that's why we said we wait until December 3rd. But we're just trying to give you the information as fast as we can, right, just because it's a condensed schedule.
And in today's leadership, sorry, I'm losing my voice. In today's leadership meeting, we did have that conversation. We knew that this was not on here as a vote, and we did discuss this with Eric, and it was decided that if the motion was made, that it is not against public meeting law to do that. So we completely understand how you feel about that. And if you'd like to wait until December, we don't have an issue with that. But we did have this conversation with leadership earlier today.
No, I think, again, I'll support it because I think the intention of this group is a good one.
Anything further? So we do have a motion, we do have a second.
It's been seconded.
Thank you. Roll call then, please.
Diane Allen,
Yes?
Greg Bendel,
Yes.
Kate Bissell,
Yes.
Glenn Brand,
Yes.
Kevin Kyra,
Yes.
Michael Comosio,
Yes.
Justin Couchet,
Yes.
Mary Ann Galezzo, Nicholas Golden,
Yes.
Christine Holleran,
Yes.
Dennis Kelly,
Yes.
Paul Millerani,
Yes.
Craig Minor,
Yes.
Judy O'Connell,
Yes.
Christine Pendergast,
Yes.
David Ragsdale,
Yes.
Paul Ruggiero,
Yes.
Stacy Scott,
Yes.
Eric Schlegel,
Yes.
Stephen Turner, and myself, yes.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the feedback and the comments. Number 8, committee questions. Are there any for the committee? Paul?
Can I just have you back up 2 or 3 slides to the layout of?
First floor?
One more. Sorry. Okay. That dog leg on the left-hand side that goes up to Arlene Ave, what is that?
This one here?
That was based on the meetings we had with public safety officials and to be able to create an emergency access only to the site, right? In case there was a blockage on one of the other sites, they could get public safety through that. So that would be a gated entrance and access would only be given to public safety.
That's an existing pedway right now.
Sure, okay, but I've heard from 2 people now already that this is gonna be a traffic nightmare, because they're gonna open up Arlene Ave for access to the school, so, and I know that that's not true. But I would suggest that if we release a diagram like this to the public, that that's clearly labeled emergency access only, big letters, et cetera, just so that we don't have an issue like that. My second question is, can you move forward? There's no auditorium in this building?
No,
Elementary schools
not an elementary school program.
Ever?
We call them cafetoriums.
Cafetoriums. I remember the cafetorium in the Boutwell School. We played basketball, we ate lunch.
But there's a stage
I think-
right by the,
Yeah, what we saw, Paul, in Tewksbury was they did a great job at putting a stage, and then they bought these tables that converted between picnic benches versus stadium seating and whatnot, so they utilize the space really well.
And what is the seating capacity for, like, like a play or a chorus event in that building?
There's 2 pieces to this, right? We have a stage that opens on 2 fronts. One, it opens to the cafeterias for more informal presentations. And also on the back side of it, there's an opening to the gymnasium, 12,000 square feet, the same as this building with this bleacher capacity. So
So you could utilize the gymnasium.
both
and-
sides, depending on what your
So we call
outcome
that,
is.
we call that a cafegimatorium.
And, okay, so just like capacity-wise, this is gonna be like the middle school where we can't have a full school assembly at one time, right?
I actually think with the 12,000 square foot gym, you are gonna have the ability to have a full school assembly in the gym space because it's so large.
As long as you have chairs enough for them.
That was my pet peeve with the middle school, is that we could not have a full.
Yeah, 755
all the
chairs,
students.
The way their MSB out of the box program is, there is no performing arts here, but even, they just don't size them a space to have full school assemblies. The reason it works here is because you guys are making the community size space. Typically, you don't get that in an elementary program.
That's great. I love the concept of having that stage open up both ways, so.
If you, it's that triangle, if you wouldn't mind Ronnie pointing to it, it like faces inbound. That's the stage area.
And it connects
So
to,
it could go outside to the cafeteria space, but then open up into the gymnasium.
That's great.
I think it's a really cool design, so.
Thank you, Paul, for those questions. Any other questions? Steve?
Not for tonight, but every meeting henceforward, I'm gonna ask about engagement with the butters to the property. It's so important that we have good engagement and not just handing them something in the mail, but sometimes it's gonna have to be face-to-face. Make sure we avoid any problems. The first day we can, if this moves forward, to recheck every property line and all those sorts of details. They're gonna have to live through this, and then they're gonna live with it, and it's really important that we treat them as if it's, pick whoever is the most important person in your life, they live next door to that property. And so I'm gonna ask about it every single time, not tonight, but just
And
for
I've
future
already
reference.
seen the comments, wait till they take your land, so we need to be way out in front.
100%.
Lee has some
That was not a
information.
pleasant meeting.
Yeah, Stephen, I think that's a great point, and we should be talking about that a lot. We just had a meeting with our civil engineer and landscape architect today, and I threw that right on the agenda as a forefront. Me personally, at, I think, our tri-board meeting, I met a couple of your abutters who had gone through a process on another project which wasn't, to their liking, and we did make that commitment to them that we'd be meeting with them early and often. So our direction to our design team was, early in January after the new year to be able to set up a couple of different meetings with just the abutters. Here's our site plan, let's roll up our sleeves and talk through all of these different issues so that we understand what those mitigation aspects of the project may or may not be early on, and we can build that into the pricing and hopefully have a good dialogue with them so they're fully understanding and we're transparent about what we're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
We have an issue with one of our other projects. If you're not up to speed with that, you should have a dialogue with the town manager and
Thank you. Other questions?
so we can avoid that again.
Let's avoid that.
Okay, public comments this evening? Anybody on the call? Doesn't look like it. Seeing no one here. Next meeting, December 3rd, as mentioned. Thank you so much for all of your time. I know there's a lot to digest tonight and a long time together, but I appreciate your engagement and continual support of the project. With that, looking for motion to adjourn tonight.
Moved.
Thank you.
Seconded.
Second, the entire committee. Okay. Roll call, please.
Diane Allen,
Yes.
Greg Bendel,
Yes.
Kate Bissell,
Yes.
Glenn Brandt,
Yes.
Kevin Kyra,
Yes.
Michael Camosio,
Yes.
thank you, Justin Couche,
Yes.
Mary Ann Galezzo. She dropped,
She
right?
dropped.
Nicholas Golden,
Yes.
Christine Holleran,
Yes.
Dennis Kelly.
Wow.
Paul Millerani.
Yes.
Craig Minor.
I'm sure this is exactly what you want to be doing.
Judy O'Connell.
Yes.
Christine Pendergast.
Yes.
David Ragsdale.
Yes.
Paul Ruggiero.
Yes.
Stacy Scott. Eric Schlegel.
Yes.
Stephen Turner.
Yes.
And yes for myself.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening.
Good night, everyone.